First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining in. And while we're here to discuss one of the most interesting topics in the industry right now, I want to start off by introducing our esteemed panel who bring in their vast amount of knowledge in their space. We have with us Naomi O'Brien, who is head of M&A integration at Toast Lab. We have with us Sreepathy Viswanathan, who's Chief Corporate Development Officer at HGS Healthcare. And we have with us the CEO of MergerWare, Dharmendra Singh. And lastly, me, who's going to be a host. I head the sales and strategy at MergerWare. Glad to have everyone on board today. So I just want to start off by stating out a fact that last year, the M&A market publicly disclosed that there were deals of 5.1 trillion US dollars. That is a whopping number, which increased by 57% from 2020. We saw that the frenzied M&A activity saw no relative change due to COVID because it was fueled by the intense demand in the market for technology, for digital and data-driven assets. The pandemic surely disrupted the status quo, but economic optimism has remained high because there is a stronger deal pipeline, there's capital abundance, and there's a need for tech. So if someone would have said, what's your due diligence a couple of years ago, you would have gotten a blank stare, but yet we are here. I read a quote by Benjamin Franklin that said, the best investment is in the tools of one's own trade. And rightly said, a company's growth lies in the space when they know exactly when they want to grow beyond their organic means and start divesting or start with M&As. The more challenging the environment becomes, the more vital M&A will be. And that brings me to my first discussion pointer. Why do companies need to grow? Why do companies need to keep M&A as a key driver for achieving growth? Sri, I would love to know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks, MergerWare, and for the opportunity. And hello, everyone. I'm glad to share my thoughts. So growth is fundamental for survival, and an M&A strategy, the way I say it, my background, 25 years throughout in corporate dev, and in terms of primarily M&A, JVs, and acquisitions and divestments. So M&A I see is primarily it's to see based on the current status of the organization, what it needs to drive the growth, and how their organic growth engine is working, what support and supplementary help is necessary. Because the BATA, it's a new capability, whether the organization need to launch and whether you have the capability to launch, whether it's for new capabilities or it's for scale and efficiencies, or it can be a kind of a defensive play where you need to protect the core, or it's an offensive play where you can lead to follow, right? And there can be various angles into pursuing M&A, and perfectly it needs to align with the organization's vision of what they want to achieve, like what's their team, what's their capability, and how on their own they can achieve it, and what's the gap or what's the hole, and where it takes long time to build. That's where M&A can fit in, right? So
Rightly said so. And Naomi, while she just mentioned about how it is considered as a key driver, do you have any thoughts on this? And what do you think are the key benefits of have a targeted M&A for growth?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Sri said. And, honestly, I think it really depends on all of those factors of, do you want to access new markets? Do you want to reduce that competition, right? Like you said, I think the benefits of doing strategic acquisitions, more considerably because they're mature usually, is you get economies of scale, right? You can achieve those synergies and increase the market share at the same time. Oftentimes you get access to a lot of fantastic talent, which is very critical when you're trying to do that. You can expand your real estate portfolio if you think about it from the, where are they located and in strategic areas of growth. And it ultimately will just help diversify the portfolio. But again, I think you really have to think about that build and partner versus buy model, and what makes the most sense from a long-term strategy. So, it's not as easy if you're going to do it organically, right? It takes the time, it takes ensuring that you have the resources in place to do it, versus a buy or a partner where it's very instant, right? You can get that a lot faster. You can make an impact more quickly from a market perspective.
Absolutely, and I think it becomes both hand in hand. It's strategic and financially both, right? When you're acquiring a company, right, from their geography to the right talent, as you mentioned. And while we are achieving this, there's certain challenges and becomes completely complex. What do you think are the current challenges in the industry right now? And essentially, how should a company prepare to overcome them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge right now is the market fluctuation, right? Everybody's trying to figure out valuations and where that lands with respect to offers that they can put in. It's just, given the current environment, I don't know that that's going to be stable anytime soon. The other thing is really just making sure that you have the right strategy to align to. Right? Oftentimes, if there's not a strong strategy, long-term strategy for the company, then your corp dev teams end up kind of cycling on, a bunch of opportunities. Right? They're just trying to go chase after things and not really understanding whether that's going to make an impact, down the road. So, we like to think of things of having a first, second, third prioritization list, right? Of, hey, where are our priorities and is this strategically important before we go and spend the time and cycles looking at opportunities?
Yeah, I'll say it's kind of so well articulated, because she kind of, you kind of addressed the problem statement any corp dev team will have, right? Like say, yeah, the underlying situations, economic situations are changing. Like say the last 2-3 years, we saw a hot market segment, right? Like it's like as much it was for the talent, like it was very well for the acquiring companies too. You call some boutique segments and the most needed, like tech or digital or transformations, like you have a long line of targets to say. It was a seller's market, right? Like you have to say why I'm the right groom, why I fit you more, why it's better to be part of us than any other, right? Like, and many times the terms are taken, like so that was, and that, like in a soft money and easy, now you're transitioning into a kind of a market correction. Like the last 2 years, shares, like the structures were different, and when in up market, you're able to give the shares and you're able to attract like a what's in it for the sellers, you're able to do. But when this change is happening, right, like say the fundamental challenges, like how do you attract has changed. Like now companies may not like to use shares where they are in a deep correction territory, right? And and the way you attract, and flipping slightly from whether it's a seller's market to a even market, that's kind of changing there. And that's where, like what Naomi said, rang the bell, right? Like say the strategy needs to be defined so clearly. I think that takes away the work from being opportunistic into laser focus, because you can't run around the world planting trees everywhere. You're not there. So that's where the definition on what strategy, what's priority, what does that mean in terms of scope, what you can do on your own, what you need capabilities outside. And when you get in the preparations about, are you prepared to receive the team, acquire the team, and deliver the hypothesis of what's the investment thesis mean? So that's where the strategy definition is a big challenge to address. And in the changing times, things need to change. The way you attract a company, where you propose to a company, the way you present offers, where you structure incentives, and everything goes through a change. So we are in a flux. That's a challenge, as I'll say.
Absolutely right. And I think both of you really mentioned that how strategy plays a very vital role, while setting up the entire complex path, and, that's how it gets streamlined. My question to you in depth to this would be that, there are companies which have either, two separate teams. One would be a strategy team and one completely would be in the M&A corporate development team. Do you think both, having two teams, having two pool of groups, having, set up the right org structure, and does that impact the M&A decisions? Because there are smaller companies who do not have that bifurcation. So ideally, what do you think how this impacts?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for companies that have had both sides of that organization. A large company that's had both very organized and aligned strategy and corp dev teams, even down to the domain level, right? So it's like if you have certain industry areas that you're looking at, they're very closely aligned. And I think that allows a higher level of focus, right, on the opportunities that you're going to pursue. Tighter visibility, tighter communication, very, very much planned, right, as far as how to approach and continue forth with the growth. On the other side, I think when they're separate, it still works, right? I mean, a lot of smaller companies, to your point, have that model, but I think it's really imperative that the communication is tightly aligned across both of those, right? As far as what they're looking at from an investment perspective or partner perspective, or who they want to go buy and why, right? What's the strategic importance of it? Because again, then you're limited on a lot of resources on that front as well when you have them separated across, and things change strategically. I mean, just looking at the market right now, right? It has changed very quickly, just in the last 3 months. So I think, again, if they have it together, I think aligning by domains is very important, because then you have people very familiar with that space. If it's separate, I think it's just still a matter of ensuring that they're having frequent communication on what whether the strategy is still the same, whether things have changed, and where the resources need to put their time.
And a quick add-on there is that, like we can also fundamentally say that it depends on the organization culture and their style of doing. While we say maybe a broad brush stroke of answering is that as you grow bigger companies, it can benefit to organize to separate out, and more strategic an organization, it helps to separate out, and kind of strategic function helps in mapping external, internal, aligning capabilities, defining, working with the functions to define the strategy, articulate it, and what that means in terms of growth, and kind of laying out into the strategies and initiatives, and what does mean in terms of the projections, and you can define things. And then the M&A aspect can go on a hunting mode, right? Like say if it's a larger organization, you want to do 6-7 acquisitions a year, there is a benefit like strategy formulation is one, and deployment and M&A. And if you're more proactive, more on a hunting mode, off the shelf banker run mandates, if these are not suitable to you, and you need to go and create interest, identify these are the 20 like out of that, and you need to create interest in that there needs to be a proactive work on there. So accordingly, there can be a difference on, or if it's an opportunistic organization, like once in a while we will do, and one transaction we will do in a year kind of a thing, then it can be combined, it can be kind of smaller. So it depends on how much it is core to the organization, how many you need to do, how strategic you are, and more you define the strategy into laser thin in terms of the specifics, all the more it's important that like off-the-shelf opportunities, like typically a banker run, like with 10 ideas won't fit you, right? Like you need to go into very specific identifications and in sourcing, and then kind of sourcing becomes a big challenge. Then those situations, there is a benefit to deploying. And finally, you need to fund these two companies. These are pricey. So the more you have a bigger value to create, then it makes sense to separate out.
I think even bigger company, I have seen that, there are just separate strategy team, then there are separate, business guys within the strategy team. Then within business, there are strategy team, and they work together while they have to close the deal. So I think it depends on what type of deal, how they want to do, what is the strategy in short term and long term. That will be the idea.
Yeah.
Rightly explained by all three of you that how that intent and the role is played by separate teams, and how that could change with the culture of the company. Do you think it also the rationale changes during the deal or post deal also, that role still divests like that, or it remains in a similar strategic intent?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you think of how the rationale potentially can change, I think in the beginning, when you have pre-deal, the business leaders in conjunction with the strategy team and the corp dev team really need to drive that strategic rationale, right? There's specific reasons why they're pursuing that target, why they need to, achieve whatever growth that they're trying to go after. And they need to be able to provide that big picture for the team, right? Because there's multiple opportunities they could potentially go after, right? So what's so strategically important on this one? And then I think post deal, it should be really the business leader and the integration leader that are driving any of those changes that happen. They need to be able to, the integration leader needs to be able to enable the business leader to be successful through the integration activities based on those strategic outcomes that they want to achieve. So, I think that it does change, right? That whole, if there's any rationale change or any things, I don't typically see that on the deals that I've done. At least not major changes, right? There may be some minor tweaks. But again, I think there's something to be said about ensuring that the big picture is relayed by the business leader needs to own it. They need to be accountable and then ensure that as we're doing the integration planning through that process, that it transitions accordingly.
Right. I want to, move away from the strategy part. I also want to understand that, when we're talking about M&A strategy is, helps the company grow, and there are different handshakes between different M&A teams, right? There are people responsible for a specific job. Which M&A stage do you think is most critical for like the success of a deal outcome?
Yeah, if I need to say, I'll say, like, in fact, I'll say, I'll re-quote what Naomi said, right? Like, say, first is the definition, clarity, what we need to do. I think I'll say that's one. And second is the integration transition after a deal is done. I'll call these out too. And then the reason is that the acquisition overall, it's a very time consuming, very pricey in terms of management time, leadership time, and in terms of resources. It's very, like, if the definition is not right, teams are not aligned, and you will start spending efforts in kind of multiple directions, and any broken deal and it hits the P&L, and like if it's a listed company, it's all the more pricey, right? Like, so it's beyond that, it can take away time from the core business, and that can derail the business. So yeah, so wrong definitions, that's why it can be very pricey. And then two, in terms of integration transition, typically, I'm sure Naomi will have a better thing to say in terms of integrations, to say there is always a gap and say, why did you go for it? Finally, what's the hypothesis, what the board approved? Then how do you define, like, finally, M&A can be summarized as, like, what are the opportunities did you identify? What are the risks did you identify? How do you translate those opportunities into synergies? Who owns it? And what's the goals? And what's their incentives are? Who's accountable for it, right? And in terms of risks, how do you better manage it? How do you have the risk controls to do? And this element of it should not evaporate in thin air. That like, prior a deal, a best practice is that even before 30 days before a deal close, or 15 days, better there is a good transition to bring in. This need to be split into the right ownerships, and people understand why. And it should not happen that you do the deal for ABC reasons, and post deal it becomes XYZ, right? Like the synergies, if synergies do not happen, like in a situation like last 3 years, typically you overpay, and it depends on the synergies. If synergies evaporates, then there is a pricey too, right? So I'll call these two areas.
Naomi, would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think integration is probably the most important for success. I mean, if you don't have integration planning and execution wrapped up before close, or at least, the planning for the execution, you have a higher probability of failure. And honestly, it's where you don't want to be fumbling after the fact. You don't want to be kind of just going through the motions after you close a deal, because there's so many activities, so many moving parts that are happening at that point in time to, to Sree's point, to achieve synergies and to achieve the outcomes that you bought the deal for, right? I mean, you're paying a big price for this. So you want the functions to be aligned. You want ultimately how we're going to enable achieving synergies. What are those milestones? When are they going to happen, right? You need to have a plan to drive that forward. Even to the extent of, are there things that are going to change? When you look at an integration of a deal, understanding what their current state is and what the ultimate end state is, right? It may not be an instant transition. It may be there's an interim state for a period of time that has to happen in order to successfully do that transition. And what are the cross-functional dependencies accordingly for it? I think that's oftentimes overlooked, where you have a lot of functions that go in and they'll give their siloed perspective, but at the end of the day, there are dependencies across other functions for them to go and do their part. And at the same time, you don't want to disrupt the target, right? They have to continue being successful with their business. If everybody goes in at the same time, they'll drown. So, so for me, I think bringing integration in as early as term sheet is very critical to start understanding what those risks are. If there are issues, identifying mitigation plans so that you can very quickly pivot when those things arise. And then having those targeted milestones and activities to achieve any synergies or technical deliverables that need to happen, in order to achieve the revenues or other value drivers that have been committed to at the start of the deal.
And I'll also say kind of a single most, I'll say, like, one of the easy way to articulate is to ask oneself to say, what's in it for people? Like, see, whether in different stages of the acquisition, right? Like when you're sourcing or you're making a deal, or you're getting into a transition phase into integration planning to say how to roll out, you need to answer whether to the seller or to the integration team's functional business head or functional heads or cross-functional. What's in it for people, right? Like unless that can only be answered when there is clarity and how this all ties back into overall organization goals, what they do in their daily lives by taking up extra what's in, like, unless this is answered, when the clarity helps to answer, then second, once it's answered, then you have a better buy-in and the incentives can be aligned to what you say, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I think we highlighted one of the most important critical stages, integration. And as you said, that entire strategic, pipeline should be visible to everybody so that, you know what you are in for. We've seen clients, and Dharmendra is here to, know that we have clients who are literally starting from scratch. So they, when they want to do due diligence, so there are ways that, they reach out to us that they want to customize it in their respective manner. And, there are certain priorities. From what I understood from Naomi's, I think first priority would be, having that dependency in place, having the right people to, pick up the right jobs, and having the right KPIs to know that, the diligence and we're heading in the right manner. Is there anything else that you think would be very essential for every, company to have when they are trying to prioritize diligence and, going through that right integration process?
Yeah, I mean, I think communicating the functional priorities is probably one of the, the first things they need to do. As an example, if your company is going through some internal systems, infrastructure changes, you're not going to be able to integrate systems at the target right away, right? So understanding that factor and going in with that, that knowledge helps you build that timeline accordingly. And it also helps you deconflict any dependencies across. So, I think it's very important to have, and you may not even have, quite honestly, all functional areas needed, right? So it depends on the deal factors for who you're acquiring on what those focus areas need to be.
yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. I like Naomi said that like 80% importance finally goes in like after a deal, whether you deliver or not. Like in what makes in the presentations and Excels are normally attractive, right? Like but execution is where things fail. Like it's good to like one of the best practices to define, like say, unless it's a financial investor where the standalone growth is done. Like if it's a kind of strategic buyer, like the fundamental business thesis is how to make 1 + 1 4 and 5 and like or 1 + 1 at least 3. If that's done, are you making strategy out of a deal, or you have the strategy in mind to make the seller much more successful, right? Like based on the combine. I think that is very clear. Once that is defined, like what is that 1, 2, 3 that makes, that delivers 1 + 1 4, then that strategy, what does the one mean as a clear strategy, and that definition of that, like who's accountable there, and then how it needs to be kind of just delivered, needs to be cascaded across with ownerships and that, unless only then that happens, right? Like, or the other way to see is that because the underlying and there is no cookie cutter model across organization, because the underlying human network of every company is different. The way transaction business is done is different. And while one cookie cutter approach won't work, maybe a nice way to see is that, as a result of this combination, like look from the eyes of the end customer and walk back the value creation process to say, how do you sell, and how do you how do you deliver, and how do you manage, and how do you engage when both teams are coming up? How is that done seamlessly, and what changes need to be done either in the value creation process of selling and delivering, or in supporting in the kind of delivery, then who is accountable to make it seamless for them? Then that definition need to be done. And the caution here is that need to value the underlying culture, because it's always said culture can eat the strategy for breakfast, right? Like say, however hard you put up something different that doesn't fit the underlying network and the underlying kingdoms or underlying the power centers, and how do you handle it to deliver all these things need to be very carefully done. I think that's an art than a science, right?
And I think to that point, even on the culture front, I think companies have to be very realistic of, are they willing to walk away if the cultural differences are so far apart that they can't bridge the gap? Because I think, that's a challenge for integration. If it's just gung ho, we're going to move forward with this regardless of the cultural disparities, and that's a hard thing to overcome through integration. That's a hard transition to make. If you lose employees because the cultural differences are so vastly apart that you can't do change management to make that transition, you won't be successful. That'll be a fail.
100% agree. Like I say, there comes a situation where at the time of deal and prior close, or at least on the day of close, the expectations, even for the acquiring organization need to be set, right? And it's a mindset issue. Like acquiring organization should not have we are the buying company. Attitude is gone. And similarly, the acquiring companies, we are going to work the same way we are used to. Like, so the expectations, if it's not set day 0, day 30, people will learn to understand how to survive and how to play politics and so on. How the things will kind of split apart from the core hypothesis for the human reasons, right? So
I think early involvement of if you are buy side and if you involve key people, not only on the top level, I'm saying about middle level, the people who are key in the company, who are driving businesses. If they are involved with early in the integration, or they are part of handover process, I think that becomes more key. So that as soon as deal is signed and closed, the integration team is at least from both the sides, from buy side and sell side, they make a team, right? And then these are the people who are driving culture within both the organizations, because it's not one side, it's both sides, right? So that I have seen that mostly it works if you involve all the team early, give them a very strategic intent, give them a freedom to work, let them know exactly what they are going to do, how they are going to do, so that, as Sri said, after 30 days in the deal process, many get restless, right? And we have to cross 100 days. How will do that? For that, we need to really set up the field at very early in the game. So I think that is very important.
Yeah, 30, 60, 90-day plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Helps.
And that's really honestly the most visibility you have, for early execution is 30, 60, 90. Beyond that, it's nice to plan that far out, but you ultimately don't have a straight line of sight to that. So the most critical aspects usually happen in that first 100 days.
Yeah, because the devil is sits in people's mind in both organization, because you're hearing through the secrets, like channels, and it's about worrying about unnecessary things. You have to say, once you're having the plan, it helps a lot. Then it helps to over communicate through the sources a team believes in, like a kind of leaders, and to their teams, and they believe in this, and giving confidence in how business will continue, and what's in it for them, and like it helps to say how you can contribute more, and it's for the better, and what's your role, and what you can deliver, what are the opportunities before you. The clarity helps to communicate. That settles down the noise in the systems to put the energy towards where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think about the first 30 days, right? I mean, the way I'd like to operate a lot of integrations is, we have a 30, 60, 90 planned across the functions. And we do a forward look. Okay, what do we need to do to prepare for those first 30 days, right? So you do a day one readiness as an example. You say, okay, hey, these are the things that are on deck for the first 30 days. As you get towards the end of the 30 days, you do a reflection back. Did we accomplish everything that we said we were going to do? How do you measure that, right? So what are the OKRs associated with that? And oh, by the way, this is what's on deck for the next 30 days. So if there are things that didn't get accomplished in the past 30, what's the impact in the next 30? What are you rolling forward? What are the things that need to be adjusted accordingly for that? And are there any other impacts, right? Because in the first 30 days, you do find skeletons in the closet, right? I mean, once you close, you start to find more information that you may not have gotten disclosure to pre-close.
That's why we now role of change manager in any big deal is must come. Start from day one. You don't wait even to build, make it compulsory. So I think most of the deal where I work, we had a change, management as a stream, a leader defined from beginning. And he is the one who is driving most of the changes across all the streams. And that really works well.
Right. So I guess we are on the clock. Great examples and great takeaways from all three of you that you said so. And I think the bottom line lies in the fact that a well laid out plan can make huge changes and become very vital in the entire M&A process. Right from diligence to integration. If it is step-by-step rolled out, it becomes much more easier for every organization to, do their respective jobs and essentially carry out a seamless deal. Anything else anyone wants to add? Any questions from the viewers? We'd love to address them over mail. Please do reach out to us. Anything, Naomi and Sri, as your last takeaways?
M&A is always exciting. It excites everyone, but the success lies in execution, right? So execution, right? So
I 100% agree.
Yeah, whatever you plan, but if the execution is not right and not done correctly, we cannot see the success of the deal.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
awesome meeting you.
I will say too, I've never had an integration plan go 100% to plan. So, I think people have to know that there's ambiguity and have the, ability to quickly pivot and have some flexibility, right, as they go through the process.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to, connecting once more in the coming time. And thank you for your thoughts. I think our viewers would have a lot to learn from there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sri.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Naomi. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.